Knon 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to knon.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
And good morning and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm David Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink, and our guest today is Don Chapo. And Don has an interesting story. It's a good DOMA story. Don is single. He lives here in Dallas, but his husband Chris just moved to California. Chris, his husband, is married to Don. Don is not married to Chris.
That's because he's in Texas.
That is because he's in Texas. It has to do with this stupid DOMA ruling. And I say stupid DOMA ruling because everybody is, oh, you know, it's so wonderful, Edie Windsor, she's such a hero. She is. But, and Anthony Kennedy, oh, he's the gay judge. Well, he's not, but a couple of the others are. But he's the one who's been ruling for us. Third ruling that really advanced same-sex marriage rights in the Windsor case, but advanced rights for all gays and lesbians in the Lawrence case. But the ruling fell a little bit short, and here's where it fell a little bit short. It didn't force one state to recognize marriages from another state. So, and Don will tell us the story in a minute. When they were married, their marriage was valid where they got married. But now that Don is living here and Chris is living there, Chris is married, Don is not. Now, I know that they were thinking when they wrote this ruling.
What, they were thinking? Sure?
I'm sure they were. But Pattie, you and Aaron, you live in Texas, you're not married.
Right.
Don and Chris, if you lived in California where you got married, you'd be married. But what happens when one partner's in one state or one spouse is in one state, the other spouse is in another state for business reasons? One's married, the other isn't.
It's like this massive little decoder thing that you run across the map of the United States, and I'm not.
Right.
Well,
That's crazy.
My husband's a scientist, and he actually pointed out that it's a little like Schrodinger's cat.
Uh-huh.
You know what Schrodinger's cat is?
Explain it.
Alive or dead?
Alive or dead. Yeah, Erwin Schrödinger was a physicist, an Austrian physicist. In 1935, he came up with a thought experiment that was meant to discuss how something in quantum mechanics can be two things at once. Mm-hmm. And so he said you put a cat in a box with a vial of poison, and vial of poison will randomly open at some point in time, and you don't know when. And so if you look at the box, the cat, you have to think of the cat as both alive and dead. And so from looking at our marriage from the federal government's point of view, we could be both in Texas, one of us in California, one of us in Texas, one in New York, one in Texas. So from their point of view, we're kind of like Schrodinger's cat. Mm-hmm. We're married or not married at the same time.
And who knows? Now, this is going to create some problems. It's not just this funny little thing We don't know how the IRS is ruling. Now, this is where Patty starts to doze off because she hates any discussion of taxes.
I have to just catch everybody up here because this has been a long-running thing here on Lambda Weekly. I've been here almost 14 years. And David talks taxes in New York, because he's from New York. For years and over a decade now, it's just, David, please don't talk about taxes in New York. And what was the case that went to the Supreme Court?
Taxes in New York.
Taxes in New York. I was just like, no, it can't be happening.
But that's what I was saying for years. It's a tax case that's going to do it because taxes are black and white, except in your case, Tom.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to file taxes.
But taxes are black and white. Either owe it or you don't. It's either fair or it's not fair. If I make this much and I pay this much, if you make this much, you don't. It just has to have a quality there. So,
but speaking of, the court this week in New York has started ordered the refunds to begin now back to Edie Windsor and other New Yorkers in similarly situated. So they're starting to get their money back that they paid in taxes.
Yeah. Good, and that's just their state money, not their federal money. But here's the problem. If the IRS rules that if you live in a marriage equality state, you file jointly, but if you don't live in a marriage equality state, you file separately, what do you do?
Yeah, Chris is required by law to file a married filing joint in California and U.S. this year, as we understand it. I would have to sign that return since it's a married return. But I'm single, and I'm prohibited by law from filing a married filing joint return.
And Greg Abbott will stand behind you for not filing that.
Yes, I'm sure he will.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I mean, it really is that kind of a thing. Just give us your background. You were married in California during that 6-month window.
Yes. We met in 2000, and we registered in California as domestic partners in 2002. And then in that little bitty window in 2008, 3 months, we managed to pull off a wedding, and that was.
We're just moving microphones a little bit closer. Okay.
Yeah, and so we got married, and then that was the end of September, and then a month and a half later, it was just shut. The door was shut for anyone else, and we had lots of friends who got married on Halloween. They literally were running into the City Hall because the polls were not going our way in Proposition 8, so people were trying to get married very quickly.
Right. Now, after Prop 8, you remained married. Now, it just made it more confusing.
Yes.
You remained married, but other people couldn't.
Yes. There were 18,000 couples that managed to get to the altar then. We just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
And how many couples have met since then, so who wanted to get married. But one thing that you had said to me was you felt like it just wasn't fair that you were able to retain your marriage. It just was a funny kind of feeling that...
Yes. People who came after us had to register again as domestic partners, and so they would be referred to as domestic partners, and we'd walk in and say we're married, and it just felt elitist and wrong. That all the relationships didn't have the same word attached to them, and it also created a tremendous amount of confusion when you went to go do anything in the state. If you we bought a house, and all the paperwork was drawn up as registered domestic partners, so they had to redo all of the paperwork before we could sign any of it.
Wow!
Because we were married, and we went into the DMV.
And why did that make a difference?
Well, it does make a difference legally. I mean, in the state.
In what way? Because
in California, domestic partners all the same rights as married, but we weren't registered domestic partners. So to put paperwork together saying we were registered domestic partners was legally incorrect.
And you're saying you had all the same rights, but what the federal government is proving is that you don't, because the federal government is saying, well, there are certain things like immigration rights where you get if you're married, you don't get if you're domestic partners.
Yes, and that's, the DOMA ruling is great. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great. It's just going to lead to a lot more confusion in that now, I guess before we could just ignore the federal government. We were single.
Right.
Now we have to think about, are we married or are we not married? And And going back and forth is getting very confusing.
And when I say he's married, you're not, legally that really is the situation
He
you're
could be
in.
checking boxes in California, married.
well, he is.
And you're checking boxes here, single.
Single.
On all of his federal employment forms, he's checking married, and for withholding and things like that, he's checking married. But I'm not married.
Well, you know what's interesting is in the last week or two, the that group of attorneys that the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, hired to defend DOMA.
Black.
Blag. There we go. The bilateral blah blah blag had released a statement that they're no longer going to defend DOMA based on the ruling now from the Supreme Court. But there's still Section 2 of DOMA that's intact. So if they're not defending it, can any challenge that rises high enough just do away with it if they're not going to defend it? I mean, that's to me like the route to go. If there's not going to, there's no one standing there to defend it. Period.
And the Supreme Court in the Prop 8 case ruled that you have to have standing.
Yeah.
So you can't just say, "Hey, I really like this law, so I'm going to defend it." You have to have standing.
You have to be somebody in, a player
who's affected by it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the administration would have to defend it to get it to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it seems like if there's no way, we just push through and get rid of Section 2. I mean, that would just be ideal because this is going to be a mess.
It is a mess.
It really
already
is a mess.
And Don is an example of the mess.
Yeah, I was thinking about it this morning, and if Chris were to die in California, he would have survivor benefits, Social Security survivor benefits, that were available to his spouse. But I'm not his spouse, so I'm not getting those benefits.
Unless you were to fly to California.
Unless I were to fly to California.
And
But
instantly
I
when you
don't know.
landed.
I'd have to have residency there, so I'd have to get
But
an
you're still a
apartment or
spouse
something.
federally, and
Yeah.
the
I don't know
marriage
how
the
that-
marriage moves with you
Well, it moves with the
federally.
residents. It moves with the residents.
for some
I think.
situations.
For some situations. For some situations.
And for Social Security, it does move with your residence.
Yeah, and my residence
Wow.
is in Texas. Even if I fly to California, my residence is, as I understand it, is Texas. And
Straight people wouldn't put up with this. They just
So,
wouldn't put up with all this
so if you were to die, he wouldn't get anything because even though you're his spouse, you're not recognized as having a spouse.
yes, I think he would get spousal survivor benefits. He'd be eligible, but since I'm not, I'm single, I don't have those benefits to give him. So
Now, we've talked to your attorney, and she's as confused by your case as anybody. In fact, that's why she passed it on to us. Let's discuss. When you moved here,
yes,
you had a house in California.
yes,
You had to have the paperwork changed to reflect that you're married, and it's a good thing you did because the federal government is not recognizing domestic partnerships as being equal to marriage.
Correct.
But your house was under a marriage. You could just sign. He was already here. When you sold the house, you could just sign because one spouse can sign for another spouse on papers. I never thought about that before because I've never been able to do that, but you can. Here, when you bought the house, you did several other steps first.
yes. Well, the first thing we did, my first trip here, we went to an attorney, went to Rebecca. We had to get wills and trusts and powers of attorney for health care, which is very important.
And we know Rebecca well.
Yeah, she's
And-
been on our show. So,
And our
yeah.
listeners do. She's been on talking about those very important things quite a lot.
And got the power of attorney for finance purposes.
And so that's even an additional paperwork than just the basic recommended things. Power of attorney for finances are so that one of you could just sign for the house.
Yes, exactly.
For the other.
We are in effect, I think, business partners more is the best way to describe it. So we can make decisions for each other in our business affairs.
Okay. You ended up creating a trust.
Yes.
Now, what is a trust?
Well, it's just a living trust so that if something happens to him or something happens to me, the other partner automatically gets the property instead of having to go through probate. And if you're married, you don't have to go through probate. It's all automatic. If one of the spouses dies, the other spouse not only gets the property, they get stepped up basis in it for tax purposes, and they don't pay any inheritance taxes.
And with a trust, is there inheritance tax? There isn't.
With a trust, you can avoid some of the inheritance tax, but yeah, there's inheritance tax and there's There's no stepped-up basis.
Okay.
It just helps you eliminate the step of having to go to court to have the court probate your will.
Isn't it the trust that's actually buying the house then? Instead of the people?
Yes, the trust owns the bank account, the trust bought the house, and all of that. So if something happens, we don't have to worry about that.
Right, right. So you're not people anymore, you're just a trust.
We're a trust.
Well, trusts are if corporations can be people, trusts can be people, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you're a person the way a corporation is a person then.
Right,
basically.
And married people do trusts, but they do them for their kids, so that their kids won't have to do probate. They never, heterosexual married couples never think about setting up trusts so that
disclose.
the husband and the wife can keep, the husband or the wife can keep the property if the other one dies.
It's just insane.
It really is. But in this case, it's even worse.
Well, I think that we've talked about this before a couple of months ago about the hypothetical that, say, a state like Colorado, where they have civil unions, a couple who lives in Colorado gets a civil union in Colorado, and they live there. And then, you and your spouse are married in California, recognized by the federal government, recognized by the state of California, and you move to Colorado. And now they say, well, you don't have a marriage, you have a civil union. But for federal purposes, you're married.
Maybe.
Well, maybe, and certainly in some aspects. And so now you have two couples side by side who are being treated unequally in the same state, and that situation then would be, a great case.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many great cases. We're going to talk more about them. We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. We are talking to Don Chapo. He isn't married, but his husband is. We'll be back with more right after this.
In Dallas, local partners and national nonprofit Connect to Compete have made available for residents digital skills training classes. Classes include basic internet searching, internet basics, computer basics, and more. Local residents are also eligible for programs that provide assistance for internet service and computers. For more information on internet classes at local libraries, their phone number is 1-855-387-9166 or on the web at everyoneon.org. This program is in partnership with Dallas Area Libraries, Connect to Compete, and the Ad Council.
This is William, your videographer for the KNON talk shows. You can watch Lambda Weekly by going to the KNON.org website. Click on schedules to the left side of your screen, choose Lambda Weekly's page, scroll to the bottom of that page, then choose your favorite show to watch or download. This show will be ready for viewing by lunchtime Tuesday. Have a great day.
Hi, this is Patti Fink, and you're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink, and our guest is Don Chapo. Don is in an extremely odd position. He was married in California. He and his partner, Chris, then moved to Texas, so they're not married in Texas. Yesterday, Chris moved back to California because of a job opportunity while Don is taking care of business here and preparing the house for sale, doing all those kinds of things. He's not married because Texas doesn't recognize marriages, but Chris is in California where he is married. So what do you do? And it's day to day. Does it make a difference? No.
No.
I mean, you live your life, you have the same relationship, but when it comes to anything, accessing anything federal, it does make a difference. The biggest one is going to be, which is fairly immediate because there is a deadline on when you pay your taxes. IRS is thinking they'll have some good guidance within 3 years, but you still have to pay your taxes this year.
And if you mess them up, according to them,
there's penalties.
There's penalties that come after you. So.
Oh, and they actually got it wrong for a while in California. They were forcing us to file a single. And then they issued guidance several years down the road that said, oh, well, no, it's a community property state. So what you do is you add all your income together and then split it in half and file single.
Oh, gee.
So we had to go back and refile all of our tax returns for the previous years, which is not cheap or easy to do. And that's what's going to happen.
Did
this
it make
time,
any difference how much they got in the end?
Yeah, we actually got a lot of money back because of our income disparity. But it did. Yeah, it was an enormous pain.
Oh, yeah,
to do that. Yeah,
and had they done it that way in the beginning, they wouldn't have had to pay their accountant to redo taxes for 3 years.
Yeah,
I mean, which the IRS is, not our problem. Right? They didn't care.
And you
just did it wrong.
The poor little, off-the-shelf computer tax software programs just look at you and go, no,
that doesn't work.
I'm not. I can't figure this out. I'm not doing it. Yeah.
Well, I think it does affect more than just tax time and such.
I'm saying tax time because there are deadlines.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But
even here in Texas, I mean, there are just things on a daily basis, like picking up insurance papers or doing whatever that a heterosexual married couple in Texas can do, and one can sign for the other. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing is done all the time, and if they had to do it individually or as if they were single. What a rigmarole! I mean, it really is, and so it doesn't really matter, what happens federally on a day-to-day basis in Texas. This is until they're recognized from state to state. This could be a kind of like a messy thing to deal with all the time.
I remember a couple of little victories, like when Avis was the first car company that allowed a gay couple, to rent a car together.
Aaron and I were married by Avis in New Orleans.
Right.
He says, marriage by contract. This is a Cajun guy. It's great.
Well, and on our insurance, all the insurance companies I called recognize us as a married couple because they go by the state, I guess the state we were married in. So even though we were buying insurance for Texas, they recognize that. And
Insurance for a married couple is lower.
Yes.
I mean, one more way that gay people are being, can I say screwed on the ear? Okay.
Annie's shaking her head. By all means,
by all means. Annie's our engineer this week, and happy 70th birthday, Annie.
Thank you very much.
Happy Annie.
But that is one more way, because a married couple gets lower rates. A married couple is considered to be more stable, less likely to have an accident. They get lower rates.
Yeah.
So aside from everything, renting a car, if a couple was renting a car before, you had to put the other person as a second driver and pay an additional amount. I remember having a fit at a rental counter one time. I said, no, don't put him on. He's going to drive, but don't put him on that policy. If you don't want to list him, fine, but he's driving.
Yeah.
We live together. We've been together 10 years.
Right.
Don't list him. I don't care. Look at our driver's licenses, same address.
Yeah.
So, and they didn't know what to do with it, and just said, well, if blah blah blah, he's on an accident. I said, yeah, Texas insurance covers it. So.
Well, and that's why Avis married us. I mean, he declared us married. He said, because you're not going to have to pay this fee, and I don't have to fill out this box. So, on we went.
And it's all these little things that we're talking about that. I know, Don, you called them little indignities.
Right. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yeah. That you noticed when you moved from California to Texas, you just noticed.
Well, I hate to say this because I really love living in Dallas. I've been very happy with Dallas.
It's not that. Pattie and I are nice people.
It's kind of like...
Greg Abbott isn't.
Well, it's just kind of like going back in time 20 years. Texas now is where California was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I can see the roots, the beginning of change, the way I could see it 20 years ago in California, and I think that it's good and it's going to happen. But it's interesting to watch it all play out again. It's a little like deja vu.
Yeah.
It's all kind of playing out. I think it'll be quicker. I think this DOMA decision and the Prop 8 decision will be tremendously helpful for the people of Texas.
When you say it's, just these little things, I was away for a couple of weeks. I was in Canada and I was in New York.
Both marriage equality locations.
Same-sex marriage. It's not even same-sex marriage. It's just marriage.
It's just marriage.
It's just normal.
Yeah.
It's not even talked about like it's odd. It's not talked about, and I don't mean odd, I mean more like it's out of the ordinary. It just is. In Canada, I was at a conference, the premier of Manitoba sent us had a greeting. Can you just imagine Rick Perry sending a greeting to some gay group that's meeting in Texas, here in Dallas in Texas? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, when you said 20 years, I'm like, we might want to adjust that number a little higher.
I don't know.
20 years ago, Ann Richards was governor. I think it was a lot better.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we have gone backwards.
But I just think the pace of change is now so rapid, and it's almost like it's falling over itself quick, that I think you guys will have a lot less time to wait. We'll have a lot less time to wait.
And the baseball guru and political expert predictor Nate Silver says we'll have marriage equality in Texas in 2018.
Not because we're going to elect a much better governor next time, because if it is the same party in power, what's running is worse.
Yeah, who would have thought there was room to the right of Rick Perry?
Well, that's what we said about Rick Perry. Rick Perry proved that he can be a worse governor than George Bush. So somebody's going to prove that you can run to the right of Rick Perry, but a couple of them are, which is just, But 2018, he's expecting there's going to be another lawsuit in that time. It's not like, Romer v. Evans, and then it was 10 years to Lawrence, and then 10 years to Edie Windsor. It doesn't have to be another 10 years.
Yeah, it's already not. There are 2 lawsuits in Pennsylvania, I believe, and there are several others coming down the pike in other states. In Michigan, the federal district court in Michigan used the DOMA decision, the Wilson decision, to deny or to grant an injunction against a law that would have prevented public employees from having domestic health care, domestic partner health care. He cited, the day after the decision, he cited that decision and issued an injunction against the state of Michigan. So,
and the Attorney General in the state of Pennsylvania is refusing to defend their DOMA law, which is, going to expedite some things there. So it's gonna happen. It's gonna be a patchwork again of lawsuits. It's just a matter of the race to see who can make it.
And one of the things they keep saying is, right now we have 13 states. Well, last year we only had 10 states, and the year before we only had 7 states. And right now we're still waiting for Illinois. Who else? There were 1 or 2 others that were
New Jersey and Hawaii.
New Jersey and Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
And those 3 could easily, Illinois easily could just pass it. New Jersey is going to be harder because you have a governor who's going to veto, and Hawaii has to overturn their statewide DOMA that they have in their constitution, which shouldn't be difficult to do.
But sometimes those things, as they're written constitutionally, take several cycles. We have to do
Before
one thing this way, and then you have to do
but
the next
Hawaii
step.
you're right. I think they can do it all in a 1-2 step, kind of the way Minnesota did.
Right. And I know Nevada, the legislature has put it up for a vote, and then it has to come up for a vote again in 2 sessions from now or something like that. Right. So Nevada's on track.
I think it's 2 years because in the next session, which would be 2 years, something like that. Yeah.
And they're going to be chomping at the bit. I mean, we talked about this on the air about
Vegas. Yeah,
Vegas wants those weddings.
Yeah.
Why didn't they want them in the first place?
Everyone should have the right to get married by an Elvis impersonator in a drive-through.
A drag queen Elvis impersonator.
Yeah, there we go.
But so we have 4 more states that are in play, and and Pennsylvania, which
there's some action going there.
Get to a different way. So we have 13 states plus DC plus 5 Indian tribe lands, and some of that Indian land is in non-marriage equality states, which is kind of interesting. And the sky didn't fall. Nothing happened in those states where that's happening. Yeah. But with 5 more states, it just brings on more and more and more of the country that has marriage equality, which makes it more and more difficult for states like Texas to be obstinate about it.
Right, and don't underestimate the fact that California was the last state. California has more people in it than the 21 smallest states combined.
Right.
It is more than 33% of. Well, no, more than 10%. Sorry, more than 10% of the U.S. population is.
When New York took on marriage equality, it doubled the number of people covered.
Yes.
When California did, it increased it by about, I think, a quarter. the number of people covered.
Yeah, but it's
something like that.
30% of the U.S. population lives in a marriage equality jurisdiction right now, which is huge.
It is huge.
Yeah.
It is huge.
Well, and we're well over 25% of the country now, in terms of the states who have marriage equality.
So it's going to be, if Nate Silver is saying by 2018, it'll take a lawsuit to overturn. And they're going to go in increments because Ruth Bader Ginsburg just thinks things just shouldn't go too fast.
Right.
Here's what the next decision will be, is that one state has to recognize another state's marriages. Now,
Right.
Texas won't have to perform marriages, but we'll have to recognize at least. The federal government needs to recognize no matter where you're living, which would make a big difference. In your case,
Right.
then it's real clear. Okay, we're married, we filed jointly.
Well, I think the last holdouts, we do have, I think, a few states where their laws and their constitution are silent. On
New Mexico.
New Mexico's an example. Yes. And I think some of those, and Rhode Island had been, they had been silent on it, and so they passed proactively passed laws that recognize other marriages from other states. But I think it's the states like Texas that have a super DOMA in their constitution,
Which outlaws all marriage.
right, and all legal recognition of anything, anything that's
that looks
identical or similar
identical to marriage is
Right.
illegal in Texas.
which is marriage.
Which is marriage.
So, so if those things, I think, are going to be the last states to fall. They're really going to be clinging and screeching all the way down when they go.
Me being snotty like I am,
Really?
you know that. The lawsuit I'd like to see somebody challenge straight people's marriages in this state because it's very clear that anything identical to marriage is illegal in this state. I'd like every marriage in this state to be invalidated. And I'd like the Supreme Court to say, to strike down our super DOMA based on the fact that you can't invalidate everybody's marriage because you're invalidating straight people's marriages too in this state.
But
there
would be a faction of people out there who have divorce proceedings underway that would
I'd love it too.
scream hallelujah with that. Let's just take care of that
Can you
now.
imagine the mess that would create in this state if
Huge.
every marriage was invalidated?
Yeah.
I'd
Yep.
love that. Every single one. You're not talking community property anymore. This is a community property state, but if every marriage is invalidated, what do you do with the property? Every single marriage would have to go to court to divide property.
Exactly.
See, that's what's so insane is they say, well, you can't have marriage. I don't want you to get married, but I can get us married, 8 or 10 or 12 times. And it really doesn't affect them. But once it affects them, that's why when we see these like Rob Portman, he says, anti-gay, anti-gay, anti-gay. Oh, my son's gay, love gays.
Right.
Suddenly it's a new different tune.
Right.
So until it
affected me
really does affect them, it doesn't change.
Well, so that's what's so interesting. It doesn't affect me, but I'm going to defend this because it affects me.
It is. It's insane.
Isn't that what he's saying?
Well, there's a
And
narcissism.
we're supposed to think he's this great hero. I think he's a great idiot.
There's a
I feel
narcissism
sorry for this kid.
associated
There
with it.
is.
It's as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm comfortable with the situation. But the moment it hits me, then things have to change, and there's no empathy. And we noticed that a lot in California when the people who were pro Prop 8, there was this complete lack of empathy for what anyone other than what they were going through, quote unquote, going through. What we had to put up with, what we had to deal with on a daily basis. They
can't even imagine. They can't put themselves in other people's shoes at all.
No.
And I think it's not just opponents of marriage equality. I think it's indicative of a whole faction of people in this country who can't imagine, what it's like to have a dreamer kid and what that's like for them, to have lived their whole lives here and graduated high school and wanting to be Americans.
Right.
They pick something. It's like they can't even imagine it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, as Rabbi Steve Fish says, he believes in biblical marriage should be between a man, a woman, as many other women as they can afford, and a few concubines.
And I'm sure there are a couple of goats in there.
and a couple of goats, right? That's what traditional marriage really is to him, as it's been ever since biblical times.
Right. And it allegedly hasn't changed for 5,000 years.
Has not changed in thousands of years. because we know what marriage is all about.
Since you were, walking the desert with the dinosaurs. But let's not go there, because all of that together, you just mash it together. It's just like, what?
Some of the things that we were talking about also, though, other benefits that you get. It's not taxes, Patty, don't worry.
It's not taxes.
Okay,
no, it's not taxes.
But Medicare, that's one of those real odd things. If you get Medicare,
right,
or if you're on your husband's medical policy.
Yes, I'm on Chris's health care.
And you are on Chris's. If he was older than you were and he suddenly goes on Medicare, what happens to you?
Right.
Well, if you're a domestic partner, you know what happens to you? No health insurance.
Well, COBRA, too. If, for example, Chris just left one job to go to a new one, I'm not eligible for health insurance, for COBRA. He gets a continuation of health insurance between the jobs. Currently, I'm uncovered.
Wow.
So, but
that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
I mean, even though COBRA is incredibly expensive,
right.
I mean, you do it anyway because you've got to keep that coverage.
Right.
That continuum too. Because once you're not insured,
then your rates go up when you are insured because
right.
you had this lapse of coverage.
Right. Also, if you have a pre-existing condition, that becomes a significant issue if your insurance lapses.
Right.
That's going to change soon, though.
Yes. Yeah.
So under Obamacare,
it'll change for some people.
2014 for some people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Change for some people. But for somebody in your position, yes, I would say the Windsor decision covers you now.
Right.
But not in Texas necessarily.
Not in Texas.
But not in Texas. It would in California.
Family medical leave. Mm-hmm. Yes, Chris is probably eligible to take leave if something happens to me, but is he? Because I'm not, for federal purposes, I'm not his spouse. Or I am.
Or maybe you are. You're his spouse, but he's not your spouse.
Or
so you
vice
couldn't
versa.
You couldn't take off, but he could.
Yeah.
Depending upon the company. That's why this ruling is so frustrating. You have such a great case here.
And immigration. I mean, it's not your case, really. But
let's talk about immigration and where this takes us. We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. Don Chapo is our guest. He's not married, but his husband is. We'll be back with more right after this.
When they're gone for good. This is Scott from KNON's Texas Blues Radio telling you don't miss out on some great blues. KNON's Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 Blues CD. It's a CD put together by real blues fans for real blues fans like you. Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 features great local blues from Michael J. and the Paul Bird Band, JJ and the Detonators, the Chris Watson Band, the Two Tones, Rough Cut Blues Band, Jeff Stone with Charlie Love, Dave Millsap, Sirloin and the Ass Kicking Machine, Tutu Jones, Blues Boy Bo, Buddy Whittington, Andrea Dawson, Kirkland James, Sonny Colley, and Johnny Red and the Roosters. Get a copy now at Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Record Town in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records. This is a Dallas Blues collector's item. A very limited amount of vinyl copies can be found at Forever Young Records, the sponsor of this great blues project. CD downloads are available at cdbaby.com. Whether you get it as a download, on vinyl, or on CD, all the proceeds will benefit KNON. For more info on Texas Blues Radio Volume 5, visit knon.org.
I'm Christina from the Owens, and I listen to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM. See you there.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. We're talking marriage inequality in a couple, I guess. That's how you
marriage confusion.
Marriage confusion that has been brought on by the Windsor decision. You know, we thought, oh, well, everything's great now. Let's see how many rights this actually gives us. And it's odd when it gives one half of the couple rights and it doesn't give the other half of the couple rights. We weren't expecting that, which is good. Now, you haven't filed a lawsuit. I think you should. I've told Rebecca this, your attorney. I think you should. Because it's creating just complete confusion on a whole variety of issues.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's creating confusion in our household.
In your household about
Yeah.
you live here in Texas, so you're not married. He just moved yesterday back to California for a nice new job. He is married.
Right.
And you haven't been married for the last year or two that you've been here in Dallas. But you were when you went to the rights. That's ridiculous. That just doesn't work.
Right.
And I bet you're not alone. I bet this is not unique to you.
Absolutely, we're not alone. No, I guarantee you that with people moving back and forth across state lines for jobs, that we are absolutely not alone, especially with tech moving down here more and more, tech companies moving down here more and more from Silicon Valley. This is going to become a huge problem.
Well, we've had the running thing about Oklahoma. For the longest time, they had these insane laws. For example, if you were a gay couple and you adopted a child, then your second parent adoption would not be recognized in the state of Oklahoma. So let's say, okay, let's drive from Texas to Kansas.
Right.
And when you go through, this is my child. This is not my child. This is my child again.
Yes.
I mean, it's insane.
Yes.
All of it. And we were just talking about immigration, and that's going to be a really interesting thing because the Homeland Security and lots of other federal agencies have defined some things and some rules about immigration that are really going to help some long-term couples that have not been able to live in the United States.
Immigration should work. Immigration law is all written based on place of celebration as opposed to place of residence, and it had to be. Because, Patty, we're a normal heterosexual couple, you and me, and we were married in somewhere in Africa, and we came to this country. And for immigration purposes, immigration has to recognize our marriage wherever it was, in Europe somewhere, in Canada, and they have to recognize it just because otherwise, well, we don't recognize Australia's marriages. How's that going to work?
Yeah, you're not going to. It's not a functional world.
It's not a functional world if you're running around the world and you're married, you're not married, you're married, you're not married, unless you're gay. Then it's okay to have that patchwork. But that's going to be fixed. And I'm saying that very confidently. It's going to be fixed because it has to be fixed because the situation you're in is dumb.
Yeah, and as we discussed, the federal government, there's no centralized decision making for these purposes. The IRS will make its decisions. Immigration makes its decisions.
And some of them are based on what the law was, and some of the laws are written place of celebration, some are place of residence, and so they're basing it on how Congress wrote this hodgepodge of laws.
Right.
A whole variety of
never contemplating a situation like this. Right.
Well, never contemplating, but it's been a long time, and even with interracial marriage, states generally still recognize the marriage, and the federal government recognized those marriages. I mean, the reason it went to court was, let's just clean this out, and that was more so that everybody could marry everywhere, so they couldn't stop the marriages.
Right.
But it was still recognized. First cousins can get married in Tennessee. First cousins cannot get married in Texas. But those first cousins who married in Tennessee moved to Texas. Texas does not say you're not married. They don't do that. It's recognized. Same thing.
They could probably go to Arkansas too, or Mississippi.
I don't think they have first cousin marriage, but Tennessee and Florida do.
Well, they have like 14-year-old marriage.
Well, that's another thing.
Yeah.
You can get married at 14 in Arkansas. You move to Texas, your marriage will still be recognized.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
Yeah, I always had this image of Rick Perry in my head with his fingers shoved into his ears, just going, nah, 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 nah.
Oh, exactly.
When we moved here, like, you're not married. No, no, no.
Well, for their purposes, though, for the opposition's purposes, what we have together is a contract. Sometimes. And then other times, it's not a contract.
Right.
Because if it's a contract, states would have to, the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution would say you have to recognize contracts across state lines.
Right.
And recognize each other's. But, it's not a contract now. It's a sacred religious thing. Well, no, it's a civil marriage.
Right.
It's not a religious thing. That's why they're putting in all these religious exceptions into many of these marriage equality laws that are passing in states proactively through their legislatures. And I just think, though, that's kind of insane because there's no a restriction on that religiously in the law for straight people. I mean, if your rabbi or your preacher or your imam doesn't perform those marriages because that's part of your tenets of faith, they're not going to perform them.
Most
they're not
rabbis in the city will not do an interfaith marriage.
Well, and most
won't.
Catholic priests will not marry a divorced couple.
And so they say no to people all the time.
Right.
You know, they can continue to say no to people.
Well, it's an interesting point you brought up about contract, too. You know, in Texas, there are certain things that you can approximate through wills and trusts, powers of attorney. There are certain things that we were advised that you cannot approximate, and one of those is really important, and that is dissolution of relationship. That if you break up and you have property together, how do you divide that up? With a marriage or even with a domestic partnership, there's a court proceeding, there are laws. In Texas, you can't even draw up a contract to say, we'd like to follow Texas community property law, or we'd like to follow California. You can't do that. The court won't even recognize that contract.
Well, in a local Dallas County District Family Judge, Tina Callahan, said that our DOMA was unconstitutional for that purpose because a gay couple presented before her court to divorce, and Greg Abbott stepped in, our attorney general who's now running for governor, and said, oh, you can't divorce because if you were divorcing, that means we'd have to recognize that there was a marriage, and there's no marriage, so you can't divorce. It's insane. So you can't even dissolve the relationship.
Right. Now that has gone, as a result of Windsor, it's gone back to the Supreme Court. His side, the divorced couple side, just presented new arguments. They're waiting for the answer from the Abbott people, and then it goes to court again. This is after 3 years, 4 years.
It's been at least that, least 3 or 4.
That this divorce has been going on. So you know, would a straight couple put up with that kind of nonsense?
No, they'd just kill each other.
Of course not. So, the amount that's been spent on that is so ridiculous. When Tina Callahan just ruled, I'm just going to divide your stuff. It's a community property site. We'll just divide it in half. You're both agreeing to that? Yes, we're both agreeing to that.
Next case.
Next case.
Yeah.
And that's what Greg Abbott is preventing. Yeah, because this was not even a contested divorce. It was not a complicated case at all.
Same thing happened in Jasper, Texas. He stepped in a case there that said these two men cannot divorce.
Yeah.
Even though between two women in Austin, even though he missed the filing deadline on that one, the legislature then turned around and passed legislation to allow him to have screwed up so that he could intervene in a case that was completely settled.
You know, moving the clock to change history is something that, you know, the Republican Party and state of Texas are pretty good at. They do it in the House, they do it in the Senate, you know, they do it in the governor's mansion.
Even though that is a felony, but oh well.
We'll never underestimate the determination of the people who are against us. I mean, even in California now, I don't know if you've kept up with that, but the people who were the proponents of Prop 8 have now gone to the California Supreme Court to ask the California Supreme Court to invalidate the federal district court order, which is ridiculous, but that's what they're fighting. They're saying that the California Supreme Court can actually limit or nullify the federal district court
Why
order.
would they do that?
Yeah.
They can't.
Because on the merits.
No, but I mean, we fought a civil war over this. The federal courts are supreme over the state courts.
But why would they even want to, since they are already ruled that Prop 8 is unconstitutional?
No,
they didn't rule that.
No, the Prop 8 proponents, the people who want Prop 8 in place, they're trying to revive it.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying
the
is
Supreme Court's already said that. The state Supreme Court has already said that Prop 8.
Well, Prop 8, Supreme Court actually ruled both ways. They ruled that the previous ban in state law was unconstitutional, but then they ruled to uphold Prop 8, because it was in the Constitution.
You're right, they did.
Yes.
But I wonder if they would now have standing before the state Supreme Court.
Well, they do. That's why they're in state Supreme Court. That's the only place they have standing now. But you know, we fought a civil war over the states' rights issue, and there's a supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution, and federal court ruling on federal law is supreme over any state court. But they've got lawyers actually filing briefs arguing that we should refight the Civil War. This is how insane they
File
are
your
at this
briefs.
point.
There ought to be a place on the Supreme Court lawn that's like padded and closed, and that's the hissy fit area. And so when they come out and they don't get what they want, they can just go in there and punch and bang around and anger room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what they need.
We were talking about some of the things that you do get from Windsor, from the Windsor decision, the DOMA decision, and we just mentioned immigration. Immigration, because it's based on where you were married, a whole bunch of people are starting to get their green cards. And I don't know that the green card has actually come through yet. It takes a good 6 months for it to come through. But a number of people are actually in the process of applying for their green cards. The first one that they issued, the right to apply, because it's a two-step process. The American citizen has to file one form to be approved as the sponsoring citizen, and then the spouse then applies for the green card. The first one, given the right to apply for the green card, happened the day after Windsor, and that one's moving along. One of the interesting things that I've heard, though, is, and this is kind of interesting, you know how the other side, well, we don't care that you're gay, but why be so out about it? We don't care that you're gay, but why do you have to tell everybody? Turns out that the people that told everybody are going to have a whole lot less trouble getting their green cards than the ones who didn't. Because what you have to do in the process is, the process of applying for a green card, you have to prove that this isn't a sham marriage. So people who actually went and got married before the DOMA decision, and they've been married for a few years, they're going to have one leg up on the people who, you can get your green card now. Let's run to California. Let's get married, and that way we can apply. It's like, well, did you get married just for immigration purposes?
Right.
So that same scrutiny is going to happen to gay couples that get married after the decision.
Yeah.
Because they say, oh, you're just doing this for the green card.
As part of the application process, they actually investigate you, and they'll go to employers, they'll go to friends, they'll go to family. Well, if you're not out to your family can't talk about you as being a married couple. If you get partner benefits, DP benefits at work, that works to your benefit. If you're getting, if you always bring your partner to the Christmas party, they can say, oh, sure, they've been together, they always come to the Christmas party together, sure, they're a couple. If you're in the closet about it, it's not going to work so well.
Right.
If with your friends, we really don't have friends in the gay community, and your straight friends are all, oh yes, they're nice roommates. It's not going to work.
Yes.
So the more out you are, the easier it's going to be to get your green card, which is, I just find that part of it hysterical.
Well, and this past week, former Attorney General Alberto Gonzalez, who's tagged along with Bush W up to D.C. for so long, did an op-ed piece in the New York Times entitled "What the Court Didn't Say." And his premise, along with a co-author, is that because there was a line in Kennedy's decision that basically said that, and now you're going to be subject to the same scrutiny. They can't be sham marriages to get it for immigration purposes. He's basically saying that nullifies immigration rights for married couples going forward, or married gay couples. And I just loved Roberta Kaplan, who was the attorney for Edie Windsor, who wrote a letter to the editor and said, no, that's not what they said.
Right.
Read the opinion. I mean, these are top attorneys, allegedly.
Same scrutiny.
Right, same scrutiny.
Same scrutiny.
Right.
Which is fine.
Which is what it should be.
One of the things we were working on just locally in Dallas was, if you serve on a border commission for the city of Dallas and you have a partner, you should have the same scrutiny ethically that comes with a married couple. One of them is going to serve on a border commission. So if you're serving on the plan commission, we can see what kind of conflicts of interest your partner might have.
Right, exactly.
And whether you can actually serve cleanly or not.
Does Dallas do that?
Yeah.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and so we want to be treated. I mean, in all this, it's not just for the things that people go, oh, you're just in it for this benefit or that benefit. No, we want the full thing. We want to be held accountable in the same ways too.
Well, if you're called to testify, you're a criminal defendant in court, and your spouse is called to testify against you, they can refuse to testify, but a domestic partner never could.
Right.
You had to testify against the person that you were sharing your life with. And I guess the Federal Election Commission just ruled that we can now make contributions as married couples.
Right.
So it's a lot of little things that people will notice over time as they come out.
Right. And it's funny how they say it's 1,100 different rights that we have. I tried to track those 1,100 down, and I called up Lambda Legal, and I said, okay, so which of these 1,100 do we get today? They just started laughing.
Because I'm going to call back again on Wednesday, and the number will change, right?
Yeah.
Well, but we were talking, and I said, is there a list of what these 1,100 are? And nobody could actually come up with the list.
HRC probably has it.
But they're out there. They couldn't find it for me.
Well, it was done years ago as a request of a Republican senator.
Yeah.
Said, where are the places in the United States code where marriage
every
is,
time,
and they bring up the list.
But the thing is, it started out as about 800, and somebody came up with like the Federal Election Commission rule. Who's even thinking of things like that?
Right.
Oh, there goes another one, so it's 801. Right. Okay, there's another one. And every time something, it's 802. But I don't know that anybody's actually kept this list. I'd love to see the list and have a checklist of what we have and now what we don't, because I want lawsuits filed on each and every one of those ones that we don't.
We don't.
Because what the court ruling in the end needs to be is we're just equal.
Yes.
If you're married, you're married.
Right.
We don't need, and you know what? The court ruling could be this long, one paragraph. A same-sex couple that's married gets all the same equal rights that any married couple gets. Period. End of story. Nice and clear. That's what we need. Don, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, come again.
It was a lot of fun. I hope you get remarried to your partner. I'm sure your partner is very happily married in California. We'll be back next week with more Lambda Weekly, and we'll see you then.
KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.